Ready.
3, 2, 1, let's rock and roll! Go!
He's behind some of the most famous faces in gaming history.
Well, obviously, he's created a lot of iconic characters.
I grew up on Miyamoto-san's games.
And wouldn't take no for an answer.
And he's not afraid to kind of put his foot out there and say, I'm going to do it this way. If you don't like it, too bad.
Oh, fine then.
I think he's a madman, but he's great. But he is crazy.
For Shigeru Miyamoto, games were his destiny.
Ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to create things that would shock or surprise or bring enjoyment to people.
This unlikely superstar was recognized by Hollywood royalty.
Just by chance, George Lucas happened to be there, and he saw me and he called me into his room.
He gambled.
There were people in Nintendo that were really thinking that the numbers weren't as strong.
And won.
He's a pioneer. I mean, everything he does pushes the envelope.
This is the story of one of the most prolific figures of our time, Shigeru Miyamoto. Shigeru Miyamoto is born in Kyoto, Japan, with a more than active imagination.
He was quoted as saying, when I was a child, I did nothing but draw cartoons and manufacture puppets.
I had, in elementary school, done a lot of making my own puppets and doing puppet shows. But then as I grew up and got into middle school, that was when I really got interested in drawing comic books.
His yearning to create led to some very unusual thoughts.
I did think that it would be nice if I could be in a condition where all I had to do, or all I really could do, was draw comic strips. And so I thought if I could have some kind of illness where I didn't feel any pain or have any trouble, but still had to be in the hospital all day and draw comic books, that would be great.
Nobody else would that sound like a normal sentence, but coming from him, it just seems to click.
By age 11, Miyamoto becomes obsessed with heroic characters.
Well, actually, it was on TV where I would see a lot of the puppet shows, and that was where I'd gotten the influence to do that. So that was actually kind of a more earlier thing than getting the TV and getting the interest in the superheroes.
He goes on to attend Kanazawa College of Industrial Arts and Crafts, taking up the banjo and bluegrass. But he spends most of his time sketching and listening to music. After graduating in 1977, Miyamoto is hired as Nintendo's first industrial designer. Nintendo is better known for manufacturing a variety of goods, from playing cards to toys.
I mean, even when I first entered the company, it was really my goal to design and ultimately sell these products, really toys that I was interested in.
Miyamoto begins designing board games and packaging for toys. Impressed with his young upstart, Nintendo chairman Hiroshi Yamauchi reassigns Miyamoto to a team working on computer games. By 1980, a wave of arcade games flood the American market. Asteroids, Space Invaders, and of course, Pac-Man develop a fanatical following. Hoping to capitalize on the wave, Nintendo releases Radar Scope, their first arcade game. But the games fail to capture an audience. Desperate for a hit, Yamauchi asks Miyamoto to design a video game using a popular character who loves to eat spinach.
We began development on that game originally with the idea of using Popeye.
Nintendo negotiates with King Features to use the Popeye comic as a video game, but the Popeye license falls through. and Miyamoto looks to his past for inspiration.
Going into the mountains and playing in the mountains as a kid and finding caves and whatnot, and that sort of exploration too really lingered in my memory. And so later on in life, when I did start making video games, it kind of came back into play in my imagination.
You know, he's a kid at heart. You can kind of see that.
Ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to create things that would shock or surprise or bring enjoyment to people.
He finds exactly that in a goofy gorilla. Of course, the gorilla would need a keeper in the form of a carpenter. Miyamoto goes to the drawing board.
So Mario then became really the perfect game for kind of this jumping around and active expression, and just the motion on screen really became the best game for that type of action.
All he needs now is a name. Kong suggests gorilla, who is donkey stubborn. They combine the words and name the game Donkey Kong.
To me, Donkey Kong holds a very precious place for me, because that was really the first time where I was recognized for my work in game design.
And unlike its predecessors, Donkey Kong is the first character-based arcade game.
His style is mostly visual. It's always cute, it's always colorful, and it's always a little wacky.
These wacky characters need a story to rescue your girlfriend from the King Kong-like gorilla. A dramatic change from the shooting and tennis-style games of the past.
I mean, up to that point, video games had been designed mostly by technical people, and it was really the first time that a designer had actually created a game and been recognized for that work.
In 1981, Donkey Kong is ready for shipment overseas, but not everyone is thrilled with the final product.
These games were sent over, they were in the arcades, and nobody knew quite what to do with them. And you know, it was put into one kind of arcade location, and it did very well. More and more people were playing, and quickly we realized in America that we had a hit.
And he's not afraid to kind of put his foot out there and say, I'm going to do it this way. If you don't like it, too bad. And most people in the end love it.
And they do. Donkey Kong hits American shores and becomes a smash success for Nintendo. But by 1982, the arcade business hits a slump.
There's a lot of product out there. It wasn't selling. Retailers didn't want to, get into video games anymore.
That quickly changes, however, with the debut of the Atari home console. Nintendo is not far behind with their own home console, the NES. Yamauchi turns to his young prodigy to create another game. So Miyamoto gets creative. He takes a B player and makes him the lead.
And then here was this little Nintendo Entertainment System coming over from Japan, and this character, Mario, what was this about?
This time, it's all about Mario. Super Mario Bros. Is released in 1985 and instantly becomes a hit with audiences.
There was a soft launch in New York at the time, and it did phenomenally well.
Mario is very expressive in terms of his action, and he jumps and he runs, and that's something that children do, and they're very expressive in terms of how they move and act.
The unfolding passageways of the game were influenced once again by Miyamoto's childhood.
And I remember growing up and reading an interview with him and saying how he rode his bike to work, and he drew upon his childhood for inspiration of when he'd roam the countryside and explore caves and everything.
Mario's subterranean world is a reminder of the cool caves he explored as a boy.
That sort of exploration too really lingered in my memory, and so later on in life, when I did start making video games, it kind of came back into play in my imagination.
Miyamoto includes magic mushrooms, warp zones, and invisible doorways. Mario is an international hit, but he wouldn't be the only character to lead Miyamoto and Nintendo into the record books. Super Mario is a smash hit and a revolution in gaming. By creating worlds for players to explore and hidden elements to discover, the game sets the standard for all future home consoles.
fun. I mean, that's what it all boils down to. He somehow knows how to make a game with really tight controls, very compelling to play, challenging enough that you're going to be playing it for a while.
It's always a little wacky. You've got trees walking around and flowers smiling, but you know, it's fun, and he makes it all come together quite nicely.
And usually just cute enough and just cool enough to pull in every audience.
By 1987, Super Mario Bros. Sells a staggering 27 million units. Mario becomes one of the most beloved game characters, spawning endless merchandise and even a film. And even Miyamoto is surprised by the success.
I realized that, you know, this wasn't just, you know, how good the game was. There was something more at work there. And sometimes I wonder if it wasn't just, you know, intervention from up above.
And all of a sudden, video games were back on top, and it's all thanks to Mario Brothers. And here was a game that featured a character. It was different. It was its adventure game, something people hadn't seen before. And, you know, it went on to be, you know, probably the top-selling video game of all time was that original Mario Brothers game.
Mario was, of course, the first game to become a really huge hit all around the world and generate lots and lots of fans.
Propelled by Mario's success, Nintendo becomes the most profitable company in Japan and reportedly gathers fans like Steven Spielberg and George Lucas.
There was one instance where I was visiting Skywalker Ranch, and just by chance, George Lucas happened to be there, and he saw me and he called me into his room, and we were able to meet then.
Despite worldwide success, Miyamoto remains humble.
You know, I think really success isn't something that comes just from your own efforts.
I think he recognizes that you can't do it all alone. While he has been responsible for many games, you know, he has a very strong team behind him.
In fact, Miyamoto still makes a manager's salary, a far cry from the millions one would think.
I still believe I am a member of a team.
Good luck.
The directors and assistants that I've worked with over the years that are now coming to the forefront and working on their own games also really value the input and the strengths of working as a team.
For Mr. Miyamoto, he just has you know, wonderful freedom working at Nintendo, the ability to create these games that he wants to create. And, you know, that's what he is. He's a creator. He wants to be able to have the freedom to do that. And Nintendo has been able to grant him that freedom.
We've worked together this whole time and remained very loyal to each other, and I think that's a very, very important part of our team.
This team player still lives in a modest house in Kyoto with his wife and 2 children, and still plays a little bluegrass.
I still play guitar quite a bit, but the banjo requires a lot of technique, so I'll pick it up once in a while and play, but not as much as I used to.
Dad puts his foot down when it comes to his own kids.
We do limit how much time we let the kids play video games. I think it's more important for them to experience a lot of different things and open themselves up to different experiences. And so I'm putting a lot more emphasis on that now.
With a string of hits, the pressure is on Miyamoto to come up with original characters.
Once you have a success, you want to be able to repeat that and to continue to be innovative. And fortunately, Mr. Miyamoto has an incredibly creative mind.
And Mr. Miyamoto responds. Miyamoto adds another unforgettable character to his roster.
And for Zelda, really, it was kind of this idea of exploring a maze and really getting lost as you're having an adventure, where the start for that game came from. The more that I remembered my experience as a child and exploring the caves, and that I began to pile those experiences on top of it to kind of help with the expression and the expressive qualities of the game.
The Legend of Zelda for the NES also sets records.
Really, that was the first time that something like a Japanese RPG game, a role-playing game, sold very well overseas and became a huge international hit.
September 1996, Nintendo 64 debuts and follows the extraordinary success of the Super NES system released in 1991. Truly a revolution in game development, the console allows players to change their point of view. The result is a game that acts more like an interactive cartoon.
Well, the Nintendo 64 was really, at long last, the system where we could truly create games and worlds in 3 dimensions.
Miyamoto designs the Nintendo 64 flagship title, Super Mario 64. This takes the world's favorite plumber and puts him in an epic 3D environment.
You could actually make Mario run, skip, jump, somersault all around, and you could do that for an hour and just have fun with it.
In just 3 months, Mario sells more than 2 million copies of his game in the United States alone. With the success of Donkey Kong, Mario, and now Zelda, Miyamoto is responsible for creating 3 powerhouse franchises for Nintendo.
Having Mr. Miyamoto be a part of Nintendo has been critical to Nintendo's success. And it's because of what Mr. Miyamoto has done himself with his games, but also what he has been able to impart on other developers within our company and other developers we work with.
One of those collaborations is revolutionary. Miyamoto teams up with developers Argonaut.
Not only was the first 3D game on a video game console, but also they let us design a 3D chip, which was the world's first graphics accelerator.
Argonaut develops a special FX chip for the Nintendo cartridges, enabling a true 3D experience.
It became known as the Super FX chip, although during development it was codenamed the Mario chip.
The result is Star Fox, a space shooter game. And once again, Miyamoto scores big and consistently raises the bar. He is known worldwide as one of the very best video game designers. Oh yes, Shigeru Miyamoto has graced Nintendo with innovative games and adorable little characters. But another endeavor would prove that Miyamoto is along for the whole ride. By 1998, Miyamoto is heralded as a legend in his own time. His quest for great games continues with the release of a game that mirrors our favorite fairy tales. Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time. Miyamoto enlists a team of more than 100 programmers, designers, and artists.
He's a pioneer. I mean, everything he does pushes the envelope. It's something new. It's something original.
The pushing pays off when the latest Zelda game becomes one of the fastest-selling games in Nintendo history.
Obviously, he's created a lot of iconic characters. I mean, you could almost equate him to Walt Disney in the world of video games.
And Miyamoto is honored by his peers as the first recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Academy of Interactive Arts and Sciences.
I mean, the lasting impressions that he made are probably the single most influential video game maker in history.
In 2001, the next installment of Nintendo consoles is released, the GameCube. But with intense competition from PlayStation and Xbox, can Nintendo really compete?
I think the Nintendo, quite frankly, was a little ill-prepared. They had a system in Japan they had to worry about.
It's true that in Japan, when it launched, the initial sales figures were maybe a little bit slower than we had initially expected.
I really think Microsoft came in and kind of like kicked a little butt because, you know, they got more systems out there, more software out there, and consequently sold a lot more because of it.
But by the time we got to the end of the year, it had pretty much sold what we expected, and essentially we still had trouble meeting demand.
Miyamoto shrugs off the competition.
Rather than thinking about the competition between the hardware, really for me a more important topic is thinking about the games I've made in the past and what games I'm going to make in the future and how I can find new ways to bring enjoyment and entertainment to the user.
Nintendo's known throughout the video game industry.
Miyamoto has had his hand in over 60 Nintendo titles with new characters.
1080.
And breathing new life into old favorites.
Mario Tennis.
Hello?
Nintendo is a company that thinks very seriously about entertainment. And if entertainment were ever to go away, then Nintendo as a company would go away.
But Miyamoto has no plans of going anywhere.
He definitely and will always, be involved in the game development process. He has broadened his reach a little bit.
So lately, I've taken on a lot of more managerial style roles within Nintendo, and it's kept me quite busy. But at the same time, I'm definitely interested in continuing to work on games, and I will continue to work on games.
I think in the future, it's going to be a lot more of him sort of pushing the boundary.
So in the very near future, we will be seeing new titles.
You know, Mario Sunshine, that holds some promise.
My idea behind Mario is that he's this kind of funny old guy who, for some reason, always appears in the latest, greatest thing at the cutting edge of technology.
Definitely the new Zelda is going to be amazing.
But we're not trying to create the things that people are expecting. We're trying to create the things that people never expect.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Nintendo's own Shigeru Miyamoto!
So Shigeru Miyamoto has proved to be a man of ethics and innovation. But more importantly, he refuses to grow up.
In many ways, he's one of the true pioneers, not only of great game design, but of infusing entertaining character into his characters, which is something that today our industry still has a lot to learn about.
This is the year that our leading characters really go to work in a number of new titles. So here I'm going to play a little bit more with our latest title.
But beyond anybody else, I still think Nintendo will be at the forefront there.
So let's play a little bit.
He's pretty much genius. I mean, he's it, man.
Miyamoto is obviously, most of the console industry stands on his back in terms of history.
Mr. Miyamoto has an incredible mind. It's very creative. It's infectious. Here's this man who has created some of the most endearing video games.
So I hope you're all looking forward to Mario's latest adventure.
I had absolutely no idea that things would get this big. I couldn't even imagine it.
These are network IDs, and if he could look directly into the camera, and the first one would be watch what you play.
Watch what you play. Watch what you play.
Watch you what play.
Watch what you play.
Watch what you play.
そうですね。
もう一回言います。はい。Watch what you play.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Yeah, all right.